Okay, so our next Snap Talk presenter is Greg Collier. And Greg has been a part of Joyland on and off for a decade. And he is the father of Abby, who is getting ready to get baptized tonight, along with our sweet little Sterling. And so he's going to come up here, and he is going to talk about...
I'm going to talk to you tonight about something I'm kind of immersed in, and that's being the daddy of a little girl. But maybe from a different perspective than you might be thinking. For those of you who don't know me, just real quick, me and Abby have been through a lot. My wife passed away 5 hours after giving birth in a third world country that I had to escape from. Had to figure out how to get to the embassy. So it was a fairly traumatic event. It was a very traumatic event. And then there was, once I got here, just trying to figure out how to be a dad. I was expecting someone else to be there. So I'm really super grateful having gone through that for Larry and Vicki. I would like to honor them real quickly because they have one of the most important things imaginable, at least to me. In this church, in their ministry, there's a huge thing that goes on here, and it talks about Jesus revealing the heart of the Father. That has unlocked the Word to me so much. It has changed how I see Jesus. Now, in the 10 years I've been here, I've been listening to Larry's teachings and Larry and Vicki's ministry on this. And during that 10 years, I became a dad, so it's like a twofold immersion in teaching. And what I like to do, I always like to tell people, because I hear that my wife died, life has gotten a lot funnier with Abby. Just to tell you a really quick story, this happened last week. We're late for bedtime, and I'm trying to get to bed. She needs to get to bed. So she is in a talking mood. She is going 10 to 15 minutes nonstop, not stopping to even inhale. And Daddy, and I want to talk about the giraffes. I want to be an animal doctor and fix the ducks. And I like the flowers. I like the dandelions today. I'm like, oh, I'm laying in bed. This is going on, I'm like, for a long time. And so at this point, I'm under a quilt with my face in a pillow trying to get to bed while she's... And so she finally comes to a stop and breathes, and then she goes, "And Daddy," and so I'm like, "Yes, I want it quiet in here." So it's like, I'll try to keep it down. So there's a lot of fun that happens. There's funny moments. Also, life has not only gotten more funnier, but it's also gotten more adventurous and curious. She wants to be an animal doctor, and so we recently had a kindergarten trip to the zoo with her school, and I had to coordinate with her teacher. I had to do a lot of planning, make sure it was the right kind of lunch. We're going to sit down at a bench and eat it. And so we're doing all these things. She got to feed the giraffes, and it was great. But it occurred to me, this is something that's important to her heart. She really loves these animals, and she wants to be an animal doctor, and she's excited about this zoo trip. I'm the one doing all the planning and prepping. She comes along, holds my hand, feeds the giraffes, and has fun. And it kind of struck me. If that's how it is for me and Abby, how is it for Abba and me? When I ask him for something, when I put something before him that's really important to me, and I got a lot of stuff going on, is he going to work? Is he prepping? Is he doing stuff? Is this why he says ask and keep on asking? And so, keeping in line with Jesus being the heart of the Father, which I've learned repeatedly and never get tired of. I'm super grateful to Joyland for this. John 14:9, Jesus told Philip, "How long have I been with you? He who has seen me has seen the Father, Philip." So I asked God, now that I'm a dad and kind of had a whole paradigm shift and a new brain installed, what's it like for you? You said you're the Father. You said Jesus is the Father. And I think I found something in Mark, in the book of Mark, that just really ministered to me, and it was under the foundation of Larry and Vicki having this. Jesus came to reveal the heart of the Father. I'm like, wow, I never saw this. So I was going to go through this and how I read it differently now that I'm a dad of a little girl. First of all, just a little backstory on Mark real quick, just a couple of bullet points. Mark was the secretary and interpreter for Peter. This could have just as easily been called the Gospel of Peter instead of the Gospel of Mark. And that's been verified through history. Mark is so much different than the other Gospels. Not that the other Gospels are wrong, but so Matthew likes to establish Jesus' authority and identity as the lineage to David. So we all know, he's legit, he's the son of David. Luke traces it back to Adam. So we can verify all that. So anybody who questions whether or not he's the Messiah. John has the 7 I ams and traces him back to the Creator. And I'm getting a third base signal from the other Greg here. Is that better? Okay. John, he was the Word, back to the creation. But Mark doesn't do any of that. It's fascinating. Mark, you dive right into the ministry of Jesus. And in this story, we'll see that there's no establishing any authority of Jesus. The person who gets ministered to does that. Mark sort of thinks backwards. He reminds me of Ronnie Binzer. I call him the Ronnie Burger. Long story. But what will happen, we see, is Jesus ministers to someone like a dad. And you see an accidental confession go this way. Jesus' authority is established as he becomes the loving, miracle-working servant for someone. And he has a name for this person. It's a pretty interesting name. And so anyway, I wanted to read this and just show you how I see things a little differently as a dad as I read the Word. Thanks in huge part to Larry and Vicky and Joyland. Mark, I can't talk that. Mark 5:21. Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. Jairus means Yahweh enlightens or Yahweh awakens. That's important. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter," everybody say the word daughter, lies at the point of death. Now, real quickly, my little daughter, this is going to become kind of an irony. In the Greek, it's a fancy word called the diminutive mood. He's saying my baby girl. It's very affectionate. It's the most affectionate speaking. "Come and lay your hands on her that she may be healed, and she will live." So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now a certain woman now here's an interruption. This is a strange way that Mark writes this. It's an interruption. It stops the story and goes to a different story. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years. Everybody say the word 12. All right. And had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment, for she said, "If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well." Immediately the fountain of blood, her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" But the disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter," everybody say the word daughter, "your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." And while now we come back to the other story. We're going to resume the previous story. So it's like a sandwich. There's bread, there's meat, and there's bread. We're going back to the bread here. While he was speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" And as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, and the brother of James. John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue. He's a ruler of the synagogue, and taught, and saw a tumult, and those who wept and wailed loudly. When he came in, he said, "Why do you make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him. But when he had put them all out, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him and entered where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand and said, "Talitha cumi," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years old. Everybody say the 12. Okay, so in my very primitive PowerPoint, daughter 12, daughter 12. Now, at first, because I'm a recovering Pharisee, I had to correct God about his word. Arrogance much, right? But I asked him, I said, why do you interrupt yourself like that? Now that I'm a dad, I get it. God says, I didn't interrupt myself. My kids interrupted me. Abby interrupts me all the time. I can't finish using the restroom half the time. I can't finish a thought. So God said, well, go back through the story and find the common denominator. What are you finding? So I read it again. Daughter, 12. Daughter, 12. So what are they saying to Jesus? So I went back. My little baby girl, my little daughter, in Greek, the diminutive sense. Well, she's 12 years old. Jairus is the ruler of a synagogue. He can't say that. She's already had her bat mitzvah. She has, by Jewish customs and ordinances, all the rights and privileges of an adult woman. That's the rule. That's the rule. Why would Jairus, in front of the whole crowd in that community, do that? Because he's a dad. He's not a ruler at that moment. Nothing else matters. So I said, okay, Abba, I see that, but I don't get the interruption. And so he just showed me, daughter 12, daughter 12. Jesus, we don't know that this woman's a daughter of a synagogue ruler, or we don't know her profession. We don't know if she's married or not. We don't know anything other than what Jesus called her, daughter. The idea is this: as I read it like a dad, I'm realizing God's telling me. Do you see how that synagogue ruler brushed aside every rule, every ordinance? He is linguistically wrong. Not a little girl, but she is, because that's a dad. I felt like Jesus was telling me, where's her father? Where's that woman's father? The Bible, before I call her daughter, she was called a certain woman. Who called her daughter? The idea being, when it's important to you, it's important to Abba. There's no formality. There's a unique intimacy from a daddy and a little girl that I will never be able to describe. It's just a completely different person now, being a dad. Now, there's an interesting thing. That just gives you a portrait of how I see the Gospels now, being under Larry and Dickie's ministry. It's like, wait. Jesus isn't just walking around popping miracles. He sees a daughter. It's a big deal. So the other thing is, I said, Mark likes to do things a little bit backwards. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, that daughter with an issue of blood has violated almost every imaginable rule and is not supposed to be in public. She could be in a lot of trouble, dangerous trouble, for being in public. And she actually touched the hem of Jesus. I say the hem of Jesus' garment, that's Americanized. I believe the Jewish word is kanaf, if I looked it up correctly. His prayer shawl. that was a huge confession to who he was, because in Malachi 4:2 it says, the Son of Righteousness will rise upon you with healing in his wings. The word wings there is his talit, his prayer shawl. She's from a Jewish community, and she's in a Jewish public. Whether she knows it or not, she made an active confession as to who he was. So the way Mark does it is the Ronnie Bincer way. The person receiving the miracle makes the confession as to the credentials of Jesus Christ after there's a compassionate moment between Abba and daughter. So one of the things, as far as application goes, that I felt like God was telling me about regarding us at Joyland is David did it. He was talking to Daddy God about a request. And I've got all kinds of issues I'm asking God for, looking for. When we have a request of God and we don't see it manifest yet, what if God's working the whole time? The little girl that was sick was lying the whole time, almost the whole thing, except for the very end, she's lying down. It's the dad doing all the work and pushing aside and finding Jesus. That's the zoo thing. I'm doing all the organizing, or not all of it. The kindergarten teacher helped me a lot. But there's a lot going on. Abby shows up and holds my hand and enjoys the visit. So when we ask God for something, that same level of importance in the heart of a father, she could change her mind in a week, and probably will, about being an animal doctor. But for right now, we're on the animals. So that's just something that God showed me about being a dad, is having a life of prayer. A lot of times you don't see what you ask for as soon as you wanted to see it. What if I was working right now on everything that we're praying for? And what if it's super important to him and we can't sense that because we're busy? So that's what God's been showing me, being a dad. So any questions? I'm going to need a huge I don't know card. Most of y'all know the Bible way better than I do. Okay. All right. Mm-hmm.